Hello and welcome back to the TVBinges.com Pilot Roundtable, a Southgate Media Group podcast. I'm Kyle Tremblay, the editor of TVBinges.com, and I am joined as always by a fellow TV Binges writer. She's still simmering over her long-standing feud with Elizabeth Banks. It's Olivia Richards, hello!
Which is funny, because I just watched Pitch Perfect 2 today, so it was a little moment that we had.
Must have been a real conflicting experience for you.
Oh, yeah, it was the worst, a arch nemesis and everything.
Every time Elizabeth Banks is on the screen, you just grind your teeth loudly.
I have to go up and, take a walk really quick and just, cry a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Well, why are we talking about Elizabeth Banks? Because she was a guest star in the pilot of the show we watched tonight, which is what has weirdly become, at least among critics and Twitter users, the most controversial pilot of the season so far. It's based on the beloved characters by Jim Henson, ABC's The Muppets. Olivia, what did you think?
I feel like I personally loved it. I think it had a very 30 Rock sort of vibe to it, which I never thought I would be combining the Muppets with 30 Rock ever in my life. But I think, millennials have this thing where we like to kind of destroy our childhoods by bringing our favorite childhood characters into the adult world. And this kind of did it.
Yes.
Following in that trend.
What is your history with the Muppets as a piece of intellectual property? What do you have any history with the Muppets themselves?
I kind of watched them loosely growing up. I couldn't say that, I've seen every movie and, I was a diehard fan. I mean, as a child, I don't think there are diehard children fans of anything. You kind of just
Sure.
watch what people put on for you. But I've seen the movies. I've seen Muppets Treasure Island, and I saw the one that they did with A Christmas Carol, and maybe saw an episode of the Muppet Babies when I was really little. But, this is definitely kind of bringing it back into my adult life.
Right. And you were a 90s kid. I was a sort of 80s/90s kid. But I think that for 70s kids, these are the Muppets hold a very special place in their hearts. And I think that both you and I kind of missed out on that. Not that we didn't, the Muppets were certainly part of my childhood and I remember them, but it wasn't the, I don't feel an extremely strong attachment to them, which, based on what I've read so far, probably seems like a good thing, because it seems like the people who have a lot of problems with this pilot had very strong attachments to the Muppets.
That's what I'm kind of thinking, because I figured, the original Muppet series, I guess they said ended in 1981. So if you grew up watching that series and it was, part of your life as a child and you're used to seeing them portrayed a certain way, and then you see this, which is, them running a studio and their personal lives, and Kermit breaking up with Miss Piggy, which has been all over the news,
of course,
forever, when people freaked out and nobody knew why, and now we know why. Yeah, I could maybe see people being a little bit shocked.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have talked about the level of innuendo in this pilot, and that there are some kind of weird Muppet jokes that are a little bit edgy. There's a joke about the double meaning of the term bear.
Yep.
But overall, I don't know about you, but I didn't find the level of innuendo in this pilot to be much different than what you see in a Pixar movie or some, it seems like it's just sort of this sort of stock double humor that you get from children's stuff now, where there's something that the adults pick up on, and then there's the story that's for the kids. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, exactly. And I mean, when I'm thinking about this show, I'm not thinking about it necessarily as a kid show, because it's not a Saturday morning, we're gonna sit you in front of the Muppets and we're gonna watch this while you eat your cereal. I'm thinking this is made for millennials or adults who grew up watching the Muppets, and you're now watching them transition along with you into the adult world. So it's taking what you loved from your childhood and kind of bringing it into a new light. This isn't, I mean, also it comes on at night. I'm not thinking this is, something necessarily that you would show your kids. Not it's offensive to children, but I definitely think it's more adult centered.
Yeah, I don't think that this plays as a children's show necessarily. and for a variety of reasons. Not really. I feel like the innuendo would go over kids' heads, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't. I'm not necessarily worried about that, but for other reasons, because you already compared it to 30 Rock, which I think is a very apt comparison, um, especially given the content that Kermit is a showrunner for Miss Piggy's talk show, and they've recently broken up, and that's sort of what drives the action. At least that seems to be sort of the premise of the show. I would compare it to The Office. I would think,
I think that's good.
right, the mockumentary style, and there's a lot of the show generally takes place in the offices of this show, and there's a lot of very low key humor um, with that, and the characters are definitely like people. Like it's almost like BoJack Horseman in that there's these animal characters, in this case Muppet characters, that just sort of behave like people.
That's a really good comparison.
They don't really have any sort of fantastical traits to them. They're just kind of like dudes and ladies around the office, sort of living their lives, which was a bit jarring. That we have Muppets that don't really have any kind of fantastical traits. I'll get to what my problem with the show is, which is when you separate Kermit and Piggy, I think it sort of removes the likability from both of them, because they're the two stars of the show, right? It's the showrunner and the talk show host. Kermit and Piggy are sort of the two trademark Muppets. Like they're the central characters.
Yeah.
Kermit is a likable character because he's this put upon guy who is sort of always getting the short end of the stick, and he's together with Miss Piggy, who's very domineering, and he sort of has to say yes dear all the time. Like that's sort of what makes Kermit endearing. And Miss Piggy's endearing because she's sort of this has this very egotistical, vain personality, but has a soft spot for Kermit and like genuinely loves him. And like that's sort of what tempered those two characters. And when you take that relationship away, Kermit is kind of a dick. and, and that's
Did you ever think you'd be saying that sentence?
no, but that was my realization from this pilot. It's like, I don't like Kermit the Frog. Like, he seemed like a jerk. Like, he at one point made fun of how Animal talks in this episode. And I was like, that's not cool, bro. Like, you wouldn't do that to your friend at the office. And when you remove that relationship with Miss Piggy, what he essentially did is dumped her for a hotter version of her. Which is, again, not cool. Like, he's now dating a pig, but a cuter pig. And it's like, wow, that's like, if we're talking about The Office, that's the opposite of what Jim did when he dumped Amy Adams because he was pursuing Pam. You know, like Jim on The Office, like, he went after the less attractive woman because he was in love with her. Not that Jenna Fisher isn't attractive, but Amy Adams is like a A-list movie star. Come on, that's not the point. But he's like, yeah, it was the opposite of that. Like he's kind of a jerk move. Like I understand the reasons he would break up with Miss Piggy, certainly, but that's really like that's not cool. And then with Miss Piggy, when she doesn't have anyone to sort of be affectionate over, like I thought her best moment of this pilot was the flashback to their breakup, where there was like a real emotional moment. Like her reaction to that was like an actual like real reaction. That was kind
right? Okay, I was not expecting that. I'm like, I should not be feeling these feelings towards like, essentially puppets.
Yes, right. But that's the sort of always been the grounding factor for Miss Piggy, is this relationship with Kermit, and so it makes sense that like when we flash back to when they were together, it's like that's when she feels like a quote unquote real person. Like that's when you connect with Miss Piggy. But in the present, she's just a monster. She's terrible to everyone, and she doesn't have those beats anymore. And so it's like I don't like either of the two main characters on this show, and that's what my problem was with this pilot.
Yeah, I'm sort of Yeah, it's very interesting because like again when I was watching it, I thought that was very interesting that that was sort of what was like that wasn't in the background of a show because I feel like in a lot of shows that would be sort of like a background story but not necessarily like the main focus. But when you have that as like the main focus and like it had for me it reminded me very much of the relationship between Liz Lemon and like Jenna Maroney from 30 Rock. But
Hmm.
the difference of that was that first of all Liz Lemon and Jenna Maroney are both women and had never gone through a breakup and um it just yeah it was very kind of strange watching that tension kind of sit in the spotlight of the show.
Right? Yeah, it's a weird central premise, and then that sort of feeds into my other observation, which is that none of the Muppets seem happy. They all seem like sort of like Jim from the early season of The Office, but without like Pam to yearn over. Like they're all sort of stuck in this job that none of them seem all that excited to be at. It's kind of just like a day-to-day job. And Kermit seems like actively unhappy with his situation. And they're all stressed and they're all just working. And it's like I don't know, like this for a show about Muppets, I didn't find a single ounce of joy here. It's all very like down to earth and I guess true to the mockumentary format. But I don't know, like I wasn't happy during this pilot. I was kind of just like I was amused at times. I don't know if I laughed necessarily, but I was certainly amused by some of the jokes. But like the overall vibe was kind of dark. I guess is my
Yeah,
kind of take.
surprisingly like you wouldn't think and I definitely had that sort of thing where it's like it really did just kind of thrust them into the adult world but I mean like the really really harsh adult world
Right.
where your personal relationships suffer and you hate your job.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like they were like trying to launch a talk show where they're sort of all banding together and trying to, make a project together and you could sort of have that kind of inspirational feeling like of people working towards the same goal. They're all sort of grizzled veterans who are kind of over it and just doing this job for a paycheck. And I don't know, like it all seemed like a little bit cold to me. I don't know. It just there was something definitely like underlying and sad about this that struck me. Again, especially for a show about puppets, like that's a I don't know. I don't know. The whole thing confused me, but like tonally, it felt off to me. Um, did you laugh at all in this pilot? Like, and if so, what made you laugh?
I don't want to necessarily say I laughed because, like you said, it was a little severe.
Yeah,
But I'm like, I was definitely amused by it. And
sure.
again, because I was such a fan of 30 Rock, there were a lot of, scenes that just reminded me of that show in general. Just, seeing Kermit watching the show from behind the scenes and kind of, I think the writer's room where it was kind of my favorite part. If I was ever gonna like, I don't know, like chuckle or just be amused by something, just watching, the writer's room with just a bunch of disasters trying to keep a show running.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I could definitely see the appeal. And again, I liked parts of this. It's just the overall tone felt weird and off to me for what the show is. And so I'm wondering about that going forward. Now, it did a very nice 2.8 demo rating last night with 8.9 million total viewers, which is a strong debut that was probably expected given the hype surrounding this premiere. I'll
Oh,
be
absolutely. The marketing was crazy on this. I
Yeah,
saw like literally every time I would go on and watch something on Hulu, this would be the promo that would like pop up to the point that I had to start muting it.
yeah. I'm wondering how much of that audience will stay because even though critics have been talking about this show for a while, I think a lot of people probably this was their first experience with it, and maybe a lot of families watched thinking it might be something a little bit different than what it was. I could see a lot of parents, thinking this would be the perfect show to sort of introduce their young children to primetime TV, and it really isn't. There are, it's really not that. So let's play our new game. Do you think that this show will be canceled quickly, make it through the season but not renewed, or renewed for another season?
Based off of right now, I'm thinking that it's going to get its first season and maybe a tentative second one. I'm really banking on it having the first season. Whether it goes forward, I'm not positive, but I'm thinking it might be one of those things where we surprisingly see it renewed for a second.
Yeah, I mean, the ratings will be very interesting over the next few weeks. Certainly, if it stays anywhere close to the ratings it's getting now, it'll be a no-brainer to renew. I think also there are external reasons to renew it. Having a property like the Muppets is probably a positive for ABC. So if I had to guess, I would say that it's renewed for a second season. So Olivia, your final verdict: thumbs up or thumbs down on the Muppets?
I'm going to give it a. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I liked it.
There you go. Don't let don't let me rain on your parade. I will give it a not enthusiastic, but nonetheless a thumbs down. I don't hate this show. I think a lot of people really reacted negatively to this. I am not in that camp. At the same time, there definitely is something that feels off about it, and it wasn't funny enough for me to really endorse. But at the same time, I wouldn't grudge anyone for liking it, and I think there are plenty of reasons to watch it, and especially if it corrects some of those tonal issues. So going forward, it's a tepid thumbs down from me. So that's it. You've been listening to the Pilot Roundtable, a TVBenches.com and Southgate Media Group production. You can listen to all of our episodes on iTunes, where you can rate and review us. We'd appreciate that. Or find us at SouthgateMediaGroup.com. Follow Olivia on Twitter at RichardsOlivia, and me on Twitter at KyleLovesTV. Until next time.